So, anybody out here a Yes or Trevor Rabin fan? I know we are in the front row because I see the logo. Nice job. Very good. I have to say, just to share, for most of you who are in the audience here, if you've seen me do anything at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, you will know that not only am I a prog rock fan, but Yes is absolutely one of my all-time favorite bands. I talk about Yes, thank you. I'll take applause for that. I know way too much about Yes. I love the band. I've been listening to them forever, and particularly the music of Trevor Rabin. An incredible guitarist, songwriter. Not only did he contribute to the music of Yes, but we're going to talk tonight a little bit about his career starting in South Africa with the band Rabin, the film composing career he had, yes, thank you, and his great solo works. And the amazing thing about today is that his brand new album, Rio, is released today, and he spent the entire day with us here at the museum, both talking to press and doing a lot of great education things with us around the new album, which we'll talk about tonight. After this event, the new album Rio is available on CD. We'll be selling it outside, and Trevor will be sitting down to sign copies for everybody as well with the purchase of the CD. So we've got a little thing we're going to do here at the start before we get in the chairs. But first, let me introduce and let's get a warm Rock and Roll Hall of Fame welcome for the one and only Hall of Fame inductee with Yes, Trevor Rabin.
Thank you. Thank you.
Trevor, you can come right out over here and stand right next to me here.
Thank you.
All right, and we're going to invite out to Andy Leach, who is our director of our archive, museum archive, and our library and archive. And Andy, you've got some stuff you're going to hold up here and tell us. Yeah, I can hold on to that one. So Andy's going to hold up a little bit. Not only is Trevor here for the event tonight, but he is going to be donating to the museum some incredible artifacts from the history of Yes. So Trevor, you want to tell us a little bit about the outfit that Andy's holding here?
Well, I'm gonna put it on and play a solo for you in a minute. The funny thing is, that, excuse me. Yeah. This was the first thing I wore when we did 90125, and I was so excited about it. I thought, wow, this looks really cool. It was the 80s, okay? But our tour accountant backstage, just before I walked on, I had my guitar on and everything. And he walked past me and he said, "I'll have a vodka orange." And that just killed it for me, but I still wore it bravely for quite a while afterwards, and it's one of my favorite things.
Yeah, there's actually some great videos online where you can see wearing the pants and that as well. And then what do we have? We also have some sheet music here.
Yeah, I had done exactly this, and somebody dropped coffee on it. Shell? Someone dropped coffee on it, and I redid it exactly the same because I wanted to remember it as the first time I played it was on the toilet in London. But thereafter, I wrote it out and wrote the lyrics out. So I'd love the Hall of Fame to have it.
Thank you so much. Trevor, thank you so much for this generous gift to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And on behalf of the Rock Hall, I just want to thank you for entrusting us to preserve this for future generations and make it available for fans to see here in our museum. And we're honored to have you as an inductee, and we're honored that you thought to help make this part of our permanent collection. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Well, Trevor, it really is exciting to have you here today. And thank you so much. It's been great even talking to you throughout the afternoon. We got time to look around the museum a little bit as well.
Amazing. So amazing. So much to see. You can't do it in the time I had, so I'm going to have to come back.
Right. It did feel like we were on a bit of a rock and roll whirlwind tour, right?
Right.
Anything that stood out to you today that you particularly enjoyed?
I was just amazed when I saw the Beatle, especially the Jackson.
The Peter Jackson.
Peter Jackson display. Yeah. Stuff that wasn't in the movie, apparently, right?
Right.
And hearing it and seeing it, and Lennon going off the wall with the lyrics and just singing. I mean, it just encompassed everything he was, you know. Just an amazing display. And you pointed out the Mellotron to me.
That's right, yeah.
And I hadn't worked on a Mellotron, but I knew Rick Wakeman's. And I remember playing a note and going, they were the most horrible instruments, but once you got them working, they were absolutely amazing.
Yeah, it's funny, those old instruments that are very mechanical, right? It would take
Yeah.
a while to warm up. I had an old
Absolutely.
Moog keyboard that once it warmed up, it completely drifted out of tune, too.
Right. And now you have plugins
Yes.
that say, this is a mellotron. If you wanted to do what Rick's did, just press this key and it'll go. It's just ridiculous. You know, we want to go nuts.
Right, right. Well, I wanted to actually start and kind of go all the way back because as
Right.
we were even talking earlier today, you have a really interesting childhood growing up in South Africa.
Yes.
And you came from a very musical family as well. So I just wanted you to talk a little bit about that when you were young.
You know, my dad was a fantastic violinist. I mean, Paganini Caprices was like, could do that for breakfast kind of thing. There's Paganini being one of the great violin virtuoso and writers.
Yeah.
But it was incredible. There are 3 kids in our family, my brother, my sister, and myself. And we all grew up, and soon after diapers, it was piano time.
Wow.
And it was piano practice and piano. I remember my dad used to joke, my son, Trevor, could read music before English. And I don't know if that was an insult or a positive.
So what was that like? Because you said your mom played piano too, right?
Oh, my mom was a wonderful pianist. She was a great jazz pianist, but she could also play Chopin
Wow.
perfectly, and she was an amazing, amazing player. So yeah, I grew up in a family there where, you know, if you play something well, it's not going to be, oh, my son, it will be, you left the B flat out there. What are you doing?
Right. So I'd imagine in a family like that, which on one level you're getting a lot of environmental connection to music and it's sort of in the house all the time. But
Yes.
how do you then find a space to make music your own? Like where was the moment where it clicked for you maybe and you said, oh, this is something maybe I'm really interested in as a living?
Well, initially, I didn't like Mozart because it was something which was really forced on me, and because I was a kid, it didn't mean anything.
Connect, yeah.
It didn't connect. I love Bach. I love the 2-part inventions and what they did, and which we talked about. I went to afterwards, but soon after, I would be in competitions a lot of the time. My parents and my mom would make me wear short pants, and all the other guys were wearing long pants. And I'm going to feel like a nerd. Yeah, but you're going to win because everyone's going to think you're younger, you know.
Right.
So, but at about 12 years old, I became completely obsessed with Hank B. Marvin from, I don't know if you remember Cliff in the Shadows. And I became completely obsessed with him, and I had to have a guitar. And that's when I started playing guitar. I never had a lesson, but I
Ever? Do you never had a lesson?
I had one lesson, and it's not a nice story, so I can tell it. I can tell it to you
Later.
if you want. Yeah, but thereafter, I took all the books I was basically studying piano with, Czerny and Schmidt, all these
right,
great
the classic ones, yeah.
Right, but you know, exercises,
Yeah,
right?
skills, right.
And I would just do them on guitar, and that's how I started learning to play guitar.
Wow.
I mean, the first thing I ever played was Green Onions.
Oh yeah, the Booker
Okay,
T and
so-
the MGs too.
Right.
Yeah.
So once I finished learning it on one note, then I did it in fifths, and I thought, I'm getting good. But then I thought, no, you know, this is not enough, and I started learning all the Shadows stuff just by ear, but then also playing these exercises, which really developed technique for me.
Yeah. We were talking a little bit earlier too about how sort of rock and roll came to you, because it's interesting, right? We were down in the exhibit looking at the Don't Knock the Rock section, which is sort of about the reaction against rock and roll.
Right.
And you were even talking about rock and roll coming into South Africa had its own unique set of challenges, right?
Oh, yeah. Well, there were sanctions rightly because of apartheid.
Yeah.
So, and I came from a unique family in that, as a white family, my uncle on my father's side was Sidney Kentridge, who was Mandela's lawyer for 27 years.
Wow.
And it was he loved him like a brother. And then on my mother's side was Donald Woods. I don't know if you saw the movie Cry Freedom. That was written by my uncle, who exposed the whole Biko murder, basically, by the
Yeah.
police, and played by Kevin Kline in the movie quite
Yeah.
well, although nothing like my uncle.
Right.
But so, you know, growing up in that environment and hearing these stories about, the special forces or whatever they were called, have sent in T-shirts as supposed to be supporters of Donald Woods was his name, and for the kids to wear, and they had pictures of Biko on them,
Yeah.
but they were laced with acid.
Whoa.
So I remember my mother being on the phone crying her eyes out, and I didn't know what it was about. I was 9, 10 years old, whatever I was, still at school. But growing up in that environment was kind of peculiar,
Yeah.
very peculiar. And as far as music goes, which was my life from an early age, the stuff that came in, I mean, after the Cliff Richard and the Shadows,
Yeah.
and some Elvis, although Cliff was bigger than Elvis in South Africa,
Is that right? Yeah.
believe it or not.
Yeah.
But things like Led Zeppelin started coming through to South Africa, and I was really into people like Barney Kessel and Herb Ellis, and then I started doing session work, and which led to me in South Africa doing session work. There's so many. You can't say I'm specializing in this because you'll have three-day workday. So you had to kind of play everything. So I would play on a Monday morning I'd be playing on an orchestral session with pretty hefty reading stuff, but challenging and nice to do.
Yeah.
And the next I'd be on a country session. And country is huge in South Africa.
Oh, wow, yeah.
So there was a lot of country, and but as far as the influences of music, I think it was more the things like Oscar Peterson and Barney Kessel and Wes Montgomery, obviously.
Oh, yeah.
But it's funny because I was being kind of inspired to play as much rock as possible. And in 1969, the band I was with, who were basically Rabid, but it was a three-piece at the time, Ronnie, Neil, and myself, Ronnie Robot, Neil Cloud, and myself, played on this competition, Sound 69. We didn't win, but we were 15, and we did win a car. We came second.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
And I remember in the middle of, we did Heartbreaker, the Led Zeppelin song, Heartbreaker. And I'd worked the solo out, and as the solo started, I pushed on a fuzz box, which extends the volume extremely. And all that came through was police. So that was the first 15 seconds of the solo. And I just acted like I was doing the police, but not the band, the police.
Right, right.
And then I played the solo, and we won this car called a Ranger. And we drove this car for years. And
Was that the gig mobile then afterwards once you won it?
it became the wreck-mobile because we didn't know how to drive. We were 15 years old, and it was a stick shift on the thing. And we had to give it back after a year. That was the gift.
That was the deal, yeah.
And they said when they wanted to bring a lawsuit against it because we'd ruined the car. But we learned to drive, so it's good.
You were mentioning too, so you're doing these sessions, but you were talking earlier about being able to kind of go into some other areas and hear some of the music that was being made by Black South Africans at that time too, right?
No, it was pretty amazing because some of the great music that was being played in South Africa were in the townships where whites were not supposed to go. I mean, you'd be thrown in jail for going. And there were these tiny bars which were called shebeens, where they would sell illegal beer, and there'd be a band playing there, and there'd be these musicians who couldn't afford really to buy instruments, but enough to make the stuff sound great. And there was just these incredible sounding guys, and there's one guitarist, Alan Queller was his name, amazing jazz guitarist, and I used to work with a lot of these guys, just producing them and playing with them.
Yeah.
And it was just a great education.
Yeah. Now, once you officially kind of are in Rabbit, right?
Yes.
You guys really end up getting very popular in South Africa early on, right?
It was amazing. You know, TV was not illegal, but there was no TV in South Africa until 73 or so, 74. You probably know, right?
I'm not going to say. I'm not from South Africa.
No, but you would know about that if you know about Rabbit.
I know about Duncan.
Oh, okay. Well, then,
Yeah.
okay. Well, in 74 or 75,
Yeah.
color TV came to South Africa before no TV, and at
Really?
that time, yeah,
Wow.
and at that time, Rabbit was just really getting going. The album "Boys Will Be Boys"
Yeah.
had gone gold and was, you know, going nuts, and we were going to go on tour, and we started doing videos, color videos on Pop Shop, it was called.
Okay.
You know, like Top of the Pops.
Yeah, right.
A Pop Shop, and it just became something where people loved what the band looked like and sounded like,
Yeah.
and the band went nuts.
Yeah, you were sort of in the right place at the right time for
Absolutely.
that, right?
Yeah.
It's funny when you listen to that first record, like you said, Boys Will Be Boys, which comes out in 75.
Right.
There's some great tunes on there, but I think when I listen back to it now, it's almost like you're finding your way through what I think of as probably your musical influences, right? Like songs like Savage, you're
Yes.
playing almost like a Peter Frampton talk box in the solo at one point.
Oh, that's true. I
Is
never
that right?
thought of that.
Yeah?
Yes.
It is. It sounds like a talk box.
It is a
was
talk box.
Yeah.
Yeah.
On
A very early one, which
yeah.
this guy Julian Laxton, who I talked to
Oh,
you
you
about,
mentioned earlier. Yeah.
he built it.
Really?
Yeah, and I didn't even know what it was. I said, "Is it going to screw up my fillings?" You know.
You played it quite well on there. It sounds really
No,
good.
it sounds
actually.
really
Yeah.
authentic. Yeah.
Lifeline sounds like Pink Floyd to me. Like it's very atmospheric, sort of Pink Floyd.
Oh, we had such fun with that song, and we weren't that aware of the Pink Floyd influence.
Really?
Until afterwards. Yeah.
Wow,
Which is
yeah.
crazy because it is very much like it.
Yeah, but sometimes those inspirations can hit
Oh,
far
yeah.
apart from each other, too, right?
Unconsciously. Yeah.
But you did actually have a cover on there of Locomotive Breath by Jethro Tull.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that a band you guys had been listening to a bit?
No, it is a song though that we tried to do when we played at the clubs. We tried to do original music as much as possible.
Yeah.
But there were certain songs which we played and which people loved at the club. And
Right.
Locomotive Breath was one of those.
Yeah.
So we thought, let's put it on the album.
Right. You need something to keep the crowd happy, right? Yeah.
But you're right as far as finding ourselves, because me, Ronnie, and Neil had been a unit for a long time, and then changed the name to Rabbit, and Duncan came into the band.
Mm-hmm.
I'd worked with Duncan a little bit before, producing one of his songs called I Was 11 or I Am 11 or something like that.
Just a solo piece he had done?
Yeah. And then when we did Boys Will Be Boys, it was really Ronnie, me, and Neil who went into the studio, did it, and basically finished it with Julian Laxton as the engineer. And then we thought, oh my goodness, we're now a four-piece, and we have to include Duncan doing something. And so he sang one of the songs, and that's really all he did on the album.
Yeah.
But he sang it really great. He
Right.
sang Hard Ride is what he sang.
Believe it or not, if you don't mind, that's the one I want to actually play a little bit of.
Oh, absolutely.
So maybe we can listen to a little bit of it,
Absolutely.
right? So that should be, I think, the second track I had up there, Paul. Thank you.
It's my dad on violin.
Right. That awesome violin solo, I don't know if they heard it too, the violin there, your dad.
My dad.
Yeah.
And he was such an incredible reader. I mean, he played it first time. He'd never seen it.
That's a first take
That's
of
a
him?
first take.
Whoa.
That's a first. He just played it. He was an unbelievable reader.
I could hear the Paganini already in
Yeah,
there.
exactly.
Right? Yeah.
Exactly.
I love that tune because it almost feels like there's a lot of your songwriting or your musical ideas are already in there. It's got this kind of little bit of a hard rock edge, a little bit of a prog rock edge. The orchestration work that's in there is beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah, and then the kind of rhythmic play that you're doing in it too.
Right. Yeah, Neil was a great drummer.
Yeah.
And Ronnie, great rhythm section.
Yeah. After that, the next album that you guys followed up with was A Croak and a Grunt in the Night.
Right.
And that album, tell us a little bit about how that one came together, because it's in 77, so about 2 years later.
It was in 77. My dad actually phoned the record company to say, "What the hell are you doing?" Because we were all naked on the cover, other than little pieces being covered. And the name of the album, Croak and a Grunt in the Night. What does that mean? I don't know. I was just having a joint. I just know anything. But yeah, no, I mean, we really had. It was a harder album to do than Boys Will Be Boys, because we just went in and did it.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, Croak and a Grunt took, I think, 2 months, which in today's world is budget records.
Yeah,
know?
right.
But it's in those days, 2 months was a long time.
Long time, yeah, right.
But we were really happy with a lot of it. Not all of it, but a lot of it. And it did actually better than Boys Will Be Boys. So we realized we're not judges.
Right. Were you recording all those in studios in South Africa then?
All in studios in South Africa,
Yeah.
16 track.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We were talking about that a little earlier, looking at some of the
Right.
early Jimi Hendrix mixing boards and that, right?
Yeah.
I think there's some element to that you had to be sort of economically creative, right?
And early decisions.
yeah.
Yeah. And that's it. There's no going back.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially once you kind of like overlay something, it's done, right?
You can't undo it. Yeah.
I always like the title song, Croak and a Grunt in the Night. To me, it's another one, thinking of some influences around that time. It feels a little bit like maybe Alan Parsons or Supertramp or a little something like that.
Well, I love Roger Hodgson.
Yeah.
I never knew what that song was. It always confused me, and I
Is
wrote
that right?
it.
Yeah. Why is that? Why do you say it confused you? What was it about it?
The lyric was my partner in writing a lot of the songs, who was also co-producer, Pat Van Bloek, was also a lyricist, and so he had a lot to do with lyrics. And sometimes I'd be writing and I'd go, "What is that?" And I'd speak to him, and he'd say, "All right, we can change it." But so that was a confusing song, but we really had a lot of fun playing it.
Yeah.
It was such fun to play.
Yeah. That's the thing that I think about a lot of those songs you guys had that have a lot of breath. The other one on there that I really like is Hold On to Love. Is a really good song on there too. And the melody and orchestration on that are just fantastic. I mean, this idea that you guys were this band, but you were putting all this orchestral work behind you, it really had a very full sound already for a young band, you know?
And it's funny because when we played, there was a club we played at called the Take It Easy for 9 months, where the band really got huge, but it was a really seedy place, underground. I mean, I remember one month we got paid in silver, coins.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, what's going on here?
Where is this coming from?
This guy must have been at the horses or something, And but it was a great experience for the four of us to get together and really become cohesive as a band. And we became very tight. But when we went into the studio, my work is with this guy I'd mentioned to you, Walter Money, who was my orchestra teacher, Professor Walter Money, brilliant guy, unbelievable teacher. And I'm a terrible student, so he must have been good. But I utilized the fact that I've studied orchestra, and so I just loved, using that on the Rabbit stuff and
Yeah.
conducting badly, I'm sure, at the time. But it was fun.
Did your dad
and
have
and
any?
the band were totally into it.
They were.
Yeah, totally,
What did
yeah.
your dad think? Did he like the orchestrations you were doing, being such a classically trained musician?
He loved the stuff he played on,
Yeah.
and he commented on some of the other stuff favorably, and some he would say,
Not my
I
thing.
don't know, you're voicing there, I don't know about that.
So how does it come about that around the same time as when you record your first solo record, Beginnings?
Well, the whole thing went down with Rabbit, which was a whole political thing, which was just unfortunate. But the record company basically had gone down, and my father and I went to London. Record companies in South Africa sent us there to see if we can get a record deal.
Kind of shop around to different labels?
Around, yeah. And we managed to do a couple of things, but when we got back, things kind of fell apart, and I thought, okay, well, I'm leaving. And I moved to London with someone, a whole different scenario, and started a record label there with, believe it or not, a milling company.
Really?
Yeah, who owned the record company that I was went into partnership with. But primarily I was producing and doing solo albums.
Yeah. And who were some of the artists you were producing at that time?
Manfred Mann was one, Manfred Mann's Earth
Yeah.
Band, who I just love Manfred, and
Yeah.
great keyboard player. And there was a guy, Noel McCullough, who was actually landed up in Manfred's band as a singer eventually. And I also produced a band called Wild Horses. And I don't know if you know what horse means in London. It's heroin, right? And Wild Horses, I thought they were going to be just normal guys. But there were discussions about, where are we going to get our stuff? I don't want to pay for it anymore. Oh, it was a nightmare. And there were days I'd go home literally crying and going to bed to my wife and say, I don't want to do this anymore. You know, but 2 days up listening to these guys play or try and play. And then the next day, they're totally on the money and they're great. But they were guys from two of the guys. One of the guys was the bass, lovely guys. What's his name? Brian Robertson was the one guy who was with Thin Lizzy.
Oh, okay.
And Jimmy Bain was the bass player who was with Rainbow.
Right.
And that was pretty much the band. I did their first album. And they did, I think, another 2 or 3. And then I think they went elsewhere.
Yeah. It's interesting to think about that. It's interesting to think about that sort of whole period of your life, coming out of, like you said, playing in Rabbit and other bands in South Africa, learning the musicianship, learning to play live and record in a studio, and now learning production, because that's a bit of a different role, like you were hinting at there, than being a musician, right?
No, absolutely. And Julian Laxton, the guy who just sadly passed away, was someone I really looked up to from an engineering standpoint. No one else did what he did. Mutt Langer was the other guy.
Who you worked with too, right?
Very
Mutt
good
Lange,
friend of mine, and I still talk to and worked a lot for him.
Yeah.
I got a funny story about Mutt. There was a song I was doing, I can't remember the album, and I've done 1 million sessions for him at this point, and we're doing this session, and he's so particular. If you've heard Def Leppard, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
He's so particular, and there's no Pro Tools in those days, and he wants a guitar on the left and a guitar on the right, absolutely identical. And I did it, and over again. We got the one track and then the right-hand one. Eventually I said, Mutt, it's really good enough. I mean, you're splitting hairs. And his answer was, Trev, they're my hairs. I did it again.
Yeah, he was known for being so meticulous like that, right?
It's just ridiculous, but a great producer.
Yeah.
And I learned so much from him and Julian Laxton, and that just led to me really getting into engineering to a ridiculous degree.
Yeah.
We
had mentioned too, you got to work with at one point Jeff Emmerich, the great engineer producer.
Jeff
right?
Emmerich, that was an amazing thing. And it was before the times that we have now, where there's plugins that do what those old things used to do. And you can even manipulate him to do certain things that the old ones did. But Jeff we were just about to mix, and he said, let's go and have some coffee in the commissary, which was at Air Studios.
Air,
Jeff,
yeah.
at George Martin and Paul McCartney studio.
Yeah.
And where Yes recorded a lot.
Right.
So, and Jeff said to me, let's go to the commissary, have some coffee. And I said, but you've just set up, we're ready to mix. He said, yeah, but we have to warm up the Fairchild, which is a limiter.
Yeah.
And you have to get it like at 30 minutes is the peak time where it's warm enough, the tubes are at their peak, and that's when you mix it, because that's when the sound's best. And there's such an art in that, which is long forgotten.
I was lucky enough this past summer to be in London and tour Abbey Road with Glyn Johns.
Oh, yeah.
And Glyn, I asked him, I said, well, what, everybody talks about that magic of Abbey Road.
Excuse me.
There's some water there too if you need it, Trev.
Oh, good.
I said, what makes that sort of magic of the space?
Yeah.
And he said, well, it's EMI would build a lot of their own equipment. This was all these
Absolutely.
unique pieces that you
I
weren't
don't know
gonna
how to
hear.
open this.
Oh, here, I'll get it for you.
Oh, wow.
Pop up, look at that.
I'm a guitar player.
Rock and Roll Hall of Fame mug available in the store. That's right. But he said,
good,
it was all this unique equipment that they would build. And someone like you're getting at, like Jeff Emmerich, who knew not only that this equipment was the right one to use, but like the timing. Like wait till it warms up and after 30 minutes.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah.
You know, moving forward, I know we're going through this.
Chronology, yeah.
But Bob Ludwig was another guy who he was the best record cutter I'd ever come across.
Yeah. That sort of literally like mastering it down to
Oh my
the
God,
final
mastering,
album, right?
yeah. And I used to go to all the cutting things when we were cutting records.
Really?
Yeah. And I went there not because I was trying to do something special or change E equals MC squared.
Right.
I was going there because I was going to make a joke, suck on the helium and go, because the helium is what cools down the cutting, the lathe.
The lathe, yeah.
Otherwise, it would just melt. So that's what the helium was for.
Wow.
And so I worked with a lot of guys in London and South Africa. But Jeff, I got to say, I don't want to say saved, but for my ears, he saved 901 to 5. I mean,
Really?
he lifted it like 20% from where it was.
And
it was already pretty good, but
yeah.
he made such a difference. He was brilliant.
Wow.
And he's passed,
Yeah.
sadly.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about some other folks you got to work with on your third solo record, Wolf, which came out in 1980. Ray Davies, working with you on the album. Jack Bruce on the album, right? Talk a little bit about that. Now you're really in with, you're in with a pretty good crowd there. That was in London still, right?
That was in London at Ray's studio, Conch Studios.
Oh, okay.
And Ray was the associate producer, and he was great. But Jack Bruce was phenomenal.
Yeah.
And it's funny, when Chris and I first got together, he said, Jack's one of my favorite bass players, and he's always said that. But it was quite funny. One day, Jack and we had a great time playing together. Setting up, we would do the old Cream stuff, and just hearing Jack sing it, and even singing some of Eric's stuff, it was like, oh, they should have done that. And I love Eric's voice.
Right.
But Jack came, we went to a pub one night, and I just said to Jack, we had some Guinness, and I said, I hear Ginger Baker. I heard he's kicked alcohol. And Jack just walked, excuse the language, he said, that's when he's most fucking dangerous. That was Jack. Oh, he was great, and what a bass player, my God.
Yeah, amazing, right? I mean, he set such a foundation for so many bass players who came after him too, right?
And he really understood things, And then Simon Phillips, a great drummer, he was fantastic.
Yeah, he's on Wolf too then?
Yeah, he's on Wolf,
right.
And Manfred's on Wolf, he plays on Wolf,
right. Yeah.
I said to him, you're not getting away with me doing your album and going through that pain and you're not reciprocating.
Right, right. Well, then there's an interesting period that I want to talk about, because I find the sort of, as you were talking about earlier, the kind of music business part is really interesting. So now you've done the production work, solo records, Rabin. Now suddenly you're a known factor and you're kind of shopping around or being shopped around or working with managers and other representatives to kind of find the right vehicle for Trevor Rabin, right?
Right,
and
right.
This ends up getting you sort of sliding through anything from a potential ELP sort of band or Asia and eventually into Yes.
Yes.
What was that whole moment like for you, thinking about all these different artists and bands, and how were the managers helping you to maybe navigate some of that?
I'd never give managers any credit.
Okay.
No, but there were two aspects to it. The one is very exciting.
Yeah.
The other is still no money. But the one thing was David Geffen. It was quite extraordinary. Long story short, I met him in London.
And Geffen Records, we should say at that time, was like brand new.
David Geffen, Geffen Records was brand new.
Yeah.
And through John Kolodner, his A&R guy who I'd met, they decided they're going to sign me to a development deal, which I was like, oh yeah, no, I'm totally into that.
So a development deal is where you're basically going to write songs.
You write songs and develop something and then formulate some kind of whatever it's going to be.
Yeah.
And Geffen came to London. We went to a restaurant, and he sat down, and within 10 minutes he stopped and said, I don't like this place. Put £100 on the table, and we walked out. And I just followed him like, this guy's completely nuts, you know?
Right.
And we got into his car, his hired car. We sat in the back, and he said to me, I want you to sign this. I said, what is it? He said, it's a letter of intent. And I thought, is this just a way of just completely making me completely broke for the rest of my life, or does this mean anything? And I said, well, I'm a little uncomfortable with this. And he said to me, I only do special, which I didn't know what it meant.
Yeah.
But he was saying to me, I think you could be special.
I see.
I signed it.
Yeah.
I just thought, you know what? And weeks later, or a month or two later, we moved to LA. And I just started writing. I'd written quite a couple of the songs for 90125 beforehand, but really kind of finished off doing most of what that was on that 6-month period with Geffen. And then one day I got a really sweet call from Ed Rosenblatt, who was my friend, and we'd been to his house for dinner, and he was the head of finance, and still a lovely guy, but he called me and basically said, you're dropped like a lead balloon.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, what do I do now? I've bought a house just through you know, mortgage and the whole thing.
Yeah.
I'd built a studio, which I couldn't afford. And I mean, it was like, do I start doing bar mitzvahs and weddings?
Right.
I wasn't quite sure where to go.
Yeah, right.
But I stood kind of firm, and I thought, okay, I'm sending tapes out of all this material, and I'm going to see what can be achieved. And I got a on the strength of Own of Lonely Heart. Clive Davis sent me something basically saying, we feel your voice has top 40 appeal, but your music's way too left field. So later, many years later, I had a Polaroid of Cashbox, and number one, I sent it to him. You know? I don't think he has to worry. He's got reasonable kind of reputation. So, but there were 3 other areas that were being seriously looked at. One was Ron Fair, who was an incredible A&R guy and good musician at RCA, but he was a junior A&R guy at RCA. And he called me. He said, and it took a while because he hadn't listened. Then he listened, and he said, I just listened to your tape. And he talks like that. He said, Own of Lonely Heart's number 1. And I said, okay, where do I sign, kind of thing.
Right.
And we talked, and discussions started happening, and it was getting very exciting. And then I got a call from Phil Carsons from Atlantic Records.
Yeah, right.
And Phil Carsons said, look, there's Chris Squire and Alan White, there's been no yes for quite some time, and they're really looking to put something together. I think you might fit. I've sent Chris your tape. Next thing we're meeting, Chris is late.
Notoriously so, always,
Absolutely.
right?
The late Chris Squire. Love the guy. And we started playing together, me, Chris, and Alan, and it wasn't sounding great, but it just felt there was such a camaraderie and good feeling about it.
Yeah.
And a telepathy, you know how that happens,
Yeah.
right? And then it was, okay, we're going to get Tony Kaye involved, which was a great idea. And he, you know, I mean, I know there's a lot of talk about, well, there were problems with Trevor Horn, and I did the keyboards on 901 to 5. Yeah, that happened, but Tony, first of all, did some great Hammond solos on that album. And then before he left, once he left, it was just almost an automatic thing. We looked at certain people. Duncan Mackay was someone I was really interested in, who played with Kate Bush. And
Oh, yeah.
yeah, he was a fantastic keyboard player.
Yeah.
And then
Eddie Jobson, too,
Eddie
right?
Jobson was
Yeah.
the other guy, and we met with Eddie. We played with Eddie for one day, and then he actually is in the video of
He
Only
is, in
Lonely
Order
Heart.
Lonely Heart, right?
And I don't know how that happened, but it happened.
It was
We
he
never
was
played
just in the
together
band for the right 10 minutes there, right?
for the 10 minutes.
And we should mention Eddie is inducted into the Rock Hall too with Roxy Music.
Oh, well,
He was
that's
inducted
great.
with. Yeah.
Good for him, and he deserves it. He's
Yeah,
a great
absolutely.
musician. But anyway, I did the keyboards on 901 to 5, but once the album was finished, I went back to LA and I said to Chris, you know, we need Tony back. Just remember the 9 months of rehearsing. The guy's great, you know. And he got back into the band and never missed a beat. He was incredible on tour. So just in case anyone thinks Tony Kaye was not the best choice, he really was.
Yeah. And like you said, one of the great
Don't tell
B3
Rick
players.
I said that.
Yeah, Tony's B3 playing especially.
Oh,
his
you know,
organ
he
playing
was
is so
great.
good,
He was great, yeah.
Now, if we think about that process, you guys sort of, you and Alan and Chris get together, and at that time, that's when it's called cinema at that point, right?
Right. But even before then, there was also Keith Emerson and I were friends.
Right.
And Jack, obviously, and I were friends.
Yeah.
And there was no real communication about it, but there was talk about maybe, well, what about you, Keith, Jack, and Cozy Powell was the first one. And then
That'd be a good
Cozy
band.
passed away sometime before. So this was well after. So the drummer wasn't thought about.
Yeah.
But the three of us were thinking about it. But then the thing with Chris and Alan just blew up. So that's where I went.
Not only with Keith Emerson, but at one point you were almost in Asia, or they were thinking about talking to you about that at some
Yeah,
point
that's
too?
when I left Geffen.
Oh, right, because they were one of the first kind of super groups on
Yeah,
Geffen,
my
right?
dear manager, Brian Lane, on ARW,
Yeah.
kind of put Asia together.
Yep.
And it was kind of orchestrated that whatever David was going to do with me, the budget was going to go elsewhere. I think that's what happened.
Yeah, right.
But it was a happy time because I went and rehearsed with Asia, and I remember playing "You're Leaving Now,"
Yeah.
and singing that song with him. And I thought, John, you should sing this.
Yeah.
It's not a song for me. And John Wett and I were very close friends. In fact, during the development deal with Geffen, John came to the house and played for about a week.
Wow, that's cool.
And we got on great.
Yeah.
And Carl and I always
Palmer,
got on
yeah.
great. I didn't know Jeff Downs.
Yeah.
And I didn't really know Steve Howe.
Yeah.
In fact, when I got to the first dinner before the first rehearsal, I learned that, because I said when they first suggested it, I said, well, Steve Howe and I play guitar like oil and water. It's completely different styles. How's that going to, it's silly. Oh, no, he's looking forward to playing with you. And I said, well, that's kind of a little strange, but, and the pressure from Geffen, go or be fired. So I went and did it. And apparently, according to John, I said, how did Steve's not as friendly as you are? Right. How does that work out? And he said, he was told you're going to be the singer. I said, oh, great. So he arrives at rehearsal, and there's like a double-stack Marshall looking over at his Vox AC30s.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So
that didn't last too long.
no, that didn't last. And just before I left, I said to John, we went to a pub, and I said, this isn't going to work. And he said, well, it's a pity. It would be great. And I went back to LA, and I was dropped by Geffen.
Yeah.
So that's the whole story.
Yeah, that's interesting to think of, what that combination could have been with you and some of those other musicians, all fantastic musicians in their own right,
Yeah, no, and listen, they did incredibly well.
Yeah, they
They
did.
certainly didn't need me.
Right. I mean, they sort of found between John and Jeff that sort of songwriting combo
absolutely.
that worked really well
Yeah.
for them, right? Yeah.
And what Steve added to it was not what he did with Yes, it was different,
Yeah,
but
right.
it kind of worked, and
Yeah.
Carl's playing is Carl's playing.
Yeah, Carl's always fantastic. Well, let's jump back to what becomes 90125, which I'm going to go out on a limb and say, in my opinion, one of the best rock and roll albums. It's just such a fantastic record. The production, the performances on it, the songwriting on it.
Agreed.
Excellent. So you were talking a lot about you playing and Tony and Chris and Alan. How to tell the story of how John Anderson kind of makes his way. So that's where it sort of shifts out of being cinema into becoming Yes again.
Right. Well, the first thing that happened was, first of all, I'm joking, of course. I mean, nobody knows how an album's going to work out, and if it works out to be great, success has many cousins and failure has few friends. So all went well, but initially I was absolutely not insisting. That's not the word. I was encouraging everyone to keep with the name cinema.
Yeah.
Because we were now on Atlantic, and there were rumblings about, well, if we call the band Yes, it could be Ching Ching. Mm-hmm. And then there was an email from, I don't think there were emails then. There was maybe a letter to our manager saying, you have no right to use the name Cinema. Our band is called Cinema. But if you can give us $50,000, we'll go away. I'm paraphrasing.
Yeah,
but
right.
That's the basic thing. And we just thought it's just not worth it. And then we were still thinking about it. And then Chris and John had got together and talked. And John came in and to the studio and listened to the stuff, and he liked it. And he said, well, sing some stuff. And he sang a couple of songs, and it just blew me away. It was like, my God, this guy's voice is just unbelievable. And some of the stuff ultimately was that I'd sung already is still there,
Right.
because we felt it still worked. But it was funny because I remember Phil Carson saying to me, "Don't feel you've been fired as a singer. Just think you've gained one."
Right.
And I said, "Believe me, I'm absolutely ecstatic. It's great."
There's something about you and John and Chris singing together. Your voices were just stellar.
We loved singing together, and that
yeah.
was one of the things we enjoyed doing most on 90125 and Big Generator and anything we did from then onwards. Chris's voice, even in early, long before my time, we all talk about how great John is, but the sound of the Yes vocal, and John is great, but the sound of the Yes vocal was so much Chris.
Yeah.
He had such an impact on the sound. He had this kind of tenor thing in his voice, which was so strong.
I don't know if you remember it. Obviously, I've poured over this stuff, but there's a version of It Can Happen, I think it is, that was released as the demo with Chris singing the lead.
Yes,
And
yes.
that is really great. I mean, he takes the melody in a slightly different way.
Completely different way,
Yeah.
and great, strong voice. Mm-hmm. I always said to him, "Why don't you sing lead anymore?" He said, "We got the little bastard."
Just since we're talking about the Yes vocal sound, Paul, there's the track Leave It. I think it's number 7 on the list I gave you. Let's just listen to the beginning of this one if we can. Don't be afraid to turn it up.
Refuge in young man's pleasure, breaking down the dreams we make real. One down, one to go, another town, one more show.
I often dreamed about how that was put together. I mean, there's so many great harmonies and melodic parts and rhythmic parts happening there.
You know, funny thing is, we went to Battery Studios where we were recording that,
Yeah.
and we couldn't get a drum sound.
Yeah.
Ironically, it's Mutt Lange's studio who gets the best drum sound on earth, right?
Yeah.
At the time. And we couldn't get a drum sound. So I had written that opening part, and I said, why don't we just do it a cappella?
Yeah.
And Chris said, that's a great idea. And then it came to the next part, was boom, 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 boom. And it's very much lower than I would have thought, right?
Yeah.
And Chris was doing that. And he said, oh, I'm going to have to do that really early in the morning. I said, how are you going to do that? You're always late.
Oh, right.
So he did come in one day and he said, I've just woken up, it's fine. It was
Yeah.
1 o'clock in the afternoon.
Oh, man.
And that's when he did the dum,
That low
dum,
part?
That low
Yeah.
part. And it was just, he was amazing. And yeah, and we just put together this thing, and it's a terrible thing though. We did it, and then the SMPTE code, which is a code
Yeah,
that
which
locks up
syncs
machines.
Right.
The guy, the tape up wiped it, so we couldn't use the vocals, which were finished. So I listened to the tape, and we recorded all those vocals into the synclavier, which was the early sampling
Yeah,
machine,
sampler,
right?
right.
And I did all the vocals I did again, and it sounded pretty similar, but I think it was Trevor Horn said, you know what? It just doesn't sound the same as you guys. And I said, oh, Jesus, don't tell me you're going to ask me to sing that.
Sing it all again.
We
Yeah.
did the whole thing again.
Did you really?
We did.
Wow.
And it was worth it because he was
Yeah.
right. It made a big difference.
Wow. Yeah, and then that song famously has a drum machine playing for a lot of it until Alan comes in, too,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. No, and that was actually Alan's idea.
Was it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
he said, look, let's just do that, and then when the thing comes in, duck-um,
Yeah.
I'll smack it out, you know,
Wow, right.
as he can.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Really, you know, that's the thing I love about Alan's drum sound. He always really knew how to play a delicate beat, shift it around, but he always knew how to dig in when the time was right.
Oh, my
right?
goodness. There was, I mean, Alan live was like, Chris and Alan was like, you know, working with a bulldozer behind you. Soloing in front of them was like, I better not relax. These guys are serious.
Did it feel like that when you finally were playing the album live, like with the two of them? I mean, that's an incredible rhythm section. It really must have, you probably could have felt the energy on stage every night.
It was really unbelievable. I mean, there's one song called City of Love,
Yeah.
which we used to do live. And
Deep bass line in the opening.
right, just boom, boom.
Yeah.
And you would think, well, that's going to get boring after. But then Alan comes in, no boredom sets in. You know, he was just so dynamic. And he could play the most intricate stuff, all Bill's stuff, anything. Alan could play, you know.
Yeah.
He's a tremendous drummer, but he could also be meat and potatoes, Mr. Bonham, you know.
Yeah, when you needed him to really bang it out.
in his sleep, definitely.
Right, right. So, talk a little bit about the, you know, thank you again for donating your stage wear for the
Oh,
90125 tour. Talk a
My
little
wife
bit
would throw it away otherwise.
Hey, if you're emptying out the closet, just give us a ring. We're ready to talk. That's another one, too, for me growing up. I was actually just talking, is Matt out here at all tonight? Yeah, Matt and I were just talking recently about kind of concert videos from that time. And for me, we were talking earlier about Eddie Van Halen, what's that one called again? Is it Live Without Net? Yeah. That one and 9012
Oh,
Live.
right.
Those two concert films for me growing up were just like, I watched them over and over. And I think I had taped both of them, to be fair, early on off MTV, because both of them had premiered at some point.
That's
here in the
right.
States.
That's right.
Talk a little bit about that tour and sort of making that film. And
It was an amazing tour because that's the first tour.
Yeah.
And Chris said, I got really good news and bad news. The good news is that, and my spleen had been removed. I had an accident. So the tour was postponed for 6 weeks.
Wow.
So by the time the tour started, the album was really up in the charts, and we knew it was going to be okay. So
Yeah.
rehearsals were quite easy, and everything was anticipated. And Chris called me in the hospital, and the one thing he said, which was so Chris, he said, you know, apparently, you know, the delays are costing us a lot of money. We can't sue the Fontainebleau where the accident happened in Miami. So you're going to have to sue them, and then we can sue you. And I thought about it for a while and said, you're not serious, are you? And I think he thought he was, and he said, no, of course not. You know? But the incredibly gracious thing that Chris called me and said, listen, I know we're doing this whole album live, every song, because the album's happening, so
Yeah.
we know that. But we're going to have to do some of the old stuff.
Oh, right. Sure.
And I didn't really know a lot of it. I mean, in South Africa, I'd heard a number of Yes things, but mostly Roundabout, Long Distance, and Sweet Dreams, which I loved.
Very early, yeah, right.
But my favorite album at the time was Six Wives of Henry VIII.
Yeah, Rick
so I was
Wakeman.
really into Rick.
Yeah.
And so anyway, go back to where we are now. You know, I wasn't aware of topographic oceans and all that stuff. So he said, look, we're going to have to do these songs. Do them the way you want. Don't try and play it as a look-alike or anything.
Yeah.
Play it the way you want to play it, and we'll follow suit. Which is really kind of him. He could have said, look, this has got to be the way the
Has to
record
be the way Steve recorded it or something, yeah.
Right, and so that happened, and then he said, and you can choose the songs that are the more deep track stuff. We'll have to do a couple of those. You can choose.
Pick the ones.
Yeah, and so one of them I choose, which we didn't do for ages, was Close to the Edge, because I love Close to the Edge. And not Seen All Good People, which we did.
You did, yeah.
Yours Is No Disgrace, and You and I.
Yeah.
And then we didn't do, we did Awaken during the Union tour, but when we did the ARW tour, I really wanted to do that.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, Chris was so gracious, and so the tour turned out to be just a lot of fun, and there was really no pressure of, you know, it was all about this new band.
Yeah. Well, we were saying earlier, too, I said every time I've ever saw a video of you and Chris or seen you live in concert playing together, the two of you always just looked like you were having the best time.
Oh, we had such fun. We really had such fun. And there was often a three-way camaraderie with me, Chris, and Alan, where Alan would sneak in a beat which shouldn't be there.
Really?
And then and look at me like with a wink kind of thing. And then I'd add to it, and then Chris would say, I'm totally with you. You know, it was just a fantastic camaraderie.
Wow. You mentioned it, so I'm going to jump out of the sort of timeline. The Anderson, Rabin, Wakeman tour.
Yes.
Was great. Yeah, we can applaud that.
Thank you. Thank you.
And the reason I wanted to jump out and talk about that, you mentioned Awaken. For me, seeing you guys live, and then on the album, the live album you put out, the reimagining of Awaken was so cool to hear. I think that whole tour, you guys, maybe it was the combination of you and Rick and John, but like the way you reinterpreted the tunes there, I thought was really exciting.
You know, there was so much freedom and trust, particularly between Rick and I. I mean, he said the same thing to me as Chris said. He said, please don't play it the way it is on the record. Play it your way.
Yeah.
And I said, Rick, please don't play what's on 90125 the way it is. Unless you like it, play it your way. And he took total advantage of that.
Yeah.
And he played the most unbelievable things. The song Hold On.
Yeah.
When we started rehearsal, I actually thought what are you doing? And it's like, that is absolutely great.
Yeah.
You know, it was just such an enjoyable tour. I love playing with Rick.
Yeah, great musician. So let's jump back then now. So after 90125, it took you guys a while to sort of get the whole Big Generator album up and running. And I think the story is you did start that with Trevor Horn, right?
Right. And it started with the agreement that, listen, this album is with Tony Kaye. There's no more Tony Kaye's gone. You must work with Tony Kaye. Mm-hmm. And Tony Kaye landed up upstairs in a studio with a tape op or something, doing stuff. And Trevor would say to me, can we just do the keyboards you've done and we can add what's needed? And it really, it was not a very healthy situation. Mm. The songs weren't really realized. And if you really think of it, 90125 was done where the album was finished, and then John came in and added his incredible talent to it. And that's how it was done. So now Big Generator, there are 5 of us going to work together, and we've never really done that before. And so John was a bit discouraged with the whole thing, and initially. Mm-hmm. And ultimately, Trevor parted company with that album, and a friend of mine who's landed up doing live sound for us for a while, and I think even before then, Paul de Villiers started doing the production, and then I don't know what happened, but he got totally I think he just got exhausted. He said, I don't know how to continue. And so it was near the end of the album, and it landed up on my lap to mix, and I thought, I don't know what to do, but I've got to do something, you know. And went in and actually had a lot of fun. Some of the songs were really difficult, but some of the songs, like Shoot High, Aim Low, was a lot of fun to do. And a number of the songs came out, I thought, okay.
Yeah. I think, too, that album is interesting. It's when you think about how a lot of Yes fans think about Big Generator, they'll talk about, oh, it's not 90125, or it's a different direction. But I always thought when I listened to it musically, it almost does feel like some of what Yes had been before you joined kind of came into the songwriting.
I think so.
Yeah.
And I say John was disillusioned. At the end of the day, his performance on that album was absolutely stunning. I mean, he sang his butt off, you know.
Yeah. And then on songs like Finalize, again, you've got that great harmony with all of you singing.
Oh, yeah, no, there were great moments. And as you say, harmonies, me, Chris, and John. Yeah. It was just beautiful to do.
Now, is it true that Love Will Find a Way was a song you had written and originally intended to give to Stevie Nicks?
Yes.
It is?
It is. And Alan heard it one day, and he said, what is that? I said, oh, it's just a song. I pretty much wrote it for Stevie Nicks. And he said, why? And I said, why not? He said, because we should do it. And then I don't know how he managed, but he got Chris and everyone to hear it, and then it became a Yes song.
Right. Did you ever show it to Stevie Nicks and talk to her about the song?
I talked to her about it.
Did you? Yeah.
My manager at the time, she had the same manager.
Okay.
And I can't remember. I saw in St. Louis, Fleetwood Mac were playing, and then we were playing the next night, and I saw her.
Yeah.
And she said, you took my song away. But she's a sweetheart, so, you know, it was fine.
Well, then there's sort of after the Big Generator tour, there's a little bit of a hiatus in Yes, and that's when the solo album of yours that I've loved for so many years, Can't Look Away, comes out.
Right.
Great album.
Thank you.
Tell us a little bit about how that project developed, and were any of those songs you were maybe thinking were going to be Yes songs, or did you intend them to be solo songs?
They all were intended to be solo songs. You know, the lyrics were already pretty much set in stone, so it wasn't going to be appropriate for it to be Yes stuff. But there was no talk of another Yes album at the time anyway. Yeah. And so it was an album I was really like, not as much as this album, but pretty damn close. I was itching to do.
Yeah.
And then Roy Thomas Baker signed me to Elektra Records.
Oh, wow.
And he's an amazing guy.
Yeah,
Produced
great
Queen, and
Yeah, absolutely.
and then Bob Ezrin called me and said I'd love to produce the album, and we did it. And Lou's on it. Lou
Yeah.
played great on it, and it landed up being one of my proudest moments.
Yeah. It's interesting on that record, there's elements of sort of the, you know, rock and prog rock that you were doing with Yes, but I think of a song on there too, like, you know, I Can't Look Away, which I think
Yes.
we've talked about has a connection back to South Africa for you too in the
Right,
lyrics, right?
right. It's basically saying, you know, the politics that are going on there are just absolutely repulsive, and I can't look away, you know.
Yeah. And then the sort of musical piece that works in there too, if we think about Sorrow, we were talking about earlier, right?
Sorrow.
Musically, there's a connection back to the music of South
Oh,
Africa.
absolutely. It's an African background, that, and stylistically and everything.
Can we listen to a second of that one? Do you mind? I think I think that's track 17 on there that I gave you. Sorrow.
Picking, it's acoustic with the strat. It's same plane.
What you gonna do when you fall in love? How you gonna pay for the dowry? Where you gonna live when you tie the knot? Ooh, what they done to you?
Thank you.
Where does all that come from? Was that all stuff you had heard when you were in South Africa?
That's yeah. I think the whole influence there is South Africa. In fact,
Even the vocal part, right?
the vocals. I went back to South Africa to do the backing vocals.
Really?
Yeah,
Wow.
and there were the three incredible female vocalists and one male vocalist who were the backing choir on that.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
cool. Yeah. Then after that record,
Yes.
there is some rumblings of maybe Yes coming back together, but then John is off with Anderson, Bruford, Wakeman, Howe at that point, right?
Right. And at that time, Roger Hodgson, who's a dear friend
Yeah, from Supertramp.
from Supertramp, called me out of the blue and said, "I'd love to get together. It'd be interesting to try something out." And I thought, yeah, his voice is unbelievable.
Yeah.
He's a great musician. So I thought, yeah, we should get together and have lunch. Anyway, 2 weeks later, Roger arrives at my house in an RV and plugs in for 2 weeks. And I thought, that's just hippie, you know?
Literally 2 weeks, he just was
2
hanging out
weeks,
writing with
yes.
you. Yeah.
And he was so cool and so charming. I mean, my wife loved him, and that's always a good start. You know?
Right, right.
And we worked together for all this time. And while this was happening, ABWH was working, and Chris was not happy with that. And
Yeah.
I think there were rumblings of law things, but
Yeah.
I was so busy elsewhere with Roger that it didn't really concern me.
Yeah.
I mean, not that I didn't care, but I was.
But it wasn't your primary
Yeah,
thing.
I didn't care.
Yeah. In fact, you guys wrote together, what's the song off of Talk that you... that you wrote with
Walls.
you? Yeah, Walls.
Yeah.
Right, right.
No, Roger was great. I think we've probably got at least. So I keep falling off this thing. I think we wrote over a little less than half an album,
Wow.
and it really just needs to be mixed. But you know, it's like Rick and I doing this album we want to do.
Yeah.
It's you know, time is an issue. But
Yeah.
I loved working with Roger.
You should mix that album, I will say. That
No,
would be,
it's-
that,
it'd
that
be-
would be...
yeah.
We would listen to that, I think.
Yeah. Roger was great. And you remember the drummer from Santana at Woodstock? Michael Shreve,
Michael
yes.
Shreve. Okay, yeah.
He came and jammed with one day.
Oh,
and
cool.
He was amazing.
Yeah.
He's a wonderful guy. But, and then after a while, once everything had kind of calmed down a bit, Chris and Alan came up to Roger's place and rehearsed with us. And Chris started thinking of names for the band. And he said, how about the Royal Family? And I said, you arrogant bastard. And then the band didn't work out. And then the union thing came up.
Yeah.
And Roger got divorced, so which kind of also didn't help.
Right, right. So the way I know that story that you kind of get involved is they're working on the second Anderson, Bruford, Wakeman, Howe album. And is it initially that Chris or you get involved, maybe recording some parts for them and then sharing some songs together? It always seems like it just kind of, it started to merge somehow, right?
It was kind of peculiar. Out of the blue, I get a call from Clive Davis. And I think he's going to say, look, you were right with Owner Valonio. But he called to say, I'm doing this ABWH album. And I think John was involved to a degree with this call. And there was a lot of unhappiness with the album because the producer, what was his name?
Was it Jonathan Ellis?
Jonathan Ellis,
Yeah.
yes. Had replaced Steve and Rick, and so there's a
some
lot of
tracks,
unhappiness
yeah, right.
with that.
I know that's something Rick's talked a lot about, being unhappy with the album.
Right, right. And Clive said, we've got this album, and it's going to be a great album. I'm just seeing if you would like to add a song or two. So, knowing a little bit about Clive and a little bit about the music business, to me that read, we need a single, we're in trouble. So I wrote this, with Chris, I wrote Lift Me Up.
Yeah.
And Clive liked Lift Me Up. And then I wrote Miracle of Life, which was a song I wasn't intending to use with Yes, but I knew John would sound great on it.
Yeah.
And suddenly this album that was nothing to do with us, now John's singing on these things. Chris went and did a couple of backing vocals on that thing.
yeah.
But the songs I did had nothing to... I never heard Union until rehearsal.
Really?
No, because I just cared about making sure the songs I had... I heard a little bit of it because I wanted to make sure it was coherent and cohesive, right, the sound. But I didn't hear the whole album because the album finished and I was just worried about, how they're going to promote the single and what is this? And then it changed and managers all over the place talked and money became hugely involved in greed and next thing it's going to be a Yes album. And my first reaction was, you've got to be kidding, to Tony Dimitriadis, the manager. And Chris had the same thought, but
Really?
then, people spoke and said, well, if we put this together, you can do an 8-piece tour.
I want to get to the new album.
Yes.
And I want to think a little bit about this because what's so cool about the new album, Trevor, is that, again, like I said, for a person who likes Can't Look Away,
Right.
you had recorded a great record of instrumentals, Jacaranda, years ago, which was great and loved the guitar work on there.
Thank you.
But we haven't heard you make an album, a solo album like this. And the cool thing about the album Rio, has anybody had a chance to listen to it yet? Yeah, we were playing it walking in here today. I will admit I was lucky enough that your management team sent me a copy early. So I've had 2 weeks with this already that I've been spending. But some of the songs that have already even come out, like Push.
Yes.
Man, when I heard that, the first thing I said is, man, this feels like it could have been Endless Dream or a song like that off of Talk or something. And then Oklahoma, which you, I think, released as a single just the other week.
Right.
There's something, not only the fact that that song is about the Oklahoma bombing
Yes.
and the impact, but that to me is one of those great examples where lyrically, melodically, the arrangement that you're doing, and I felt like, wow, this is the film score, Trevor Rabin, toying with our emotions and pulling out the content of those lyrics. And I just found that song to be very emotional listening to it.
I wish I was this eloquent.
Thank you. You're doing it in the music. So tell us
thank you.
a little bit about the genesis of how this record kind of came about, that you decided, hey, I'm going to finally go back and make a rock solo record
I
again.
don't think it sounds like Genesis.
Oh, right.
I love
Oh,
Genesis.
good prog rock joke. Yes, that's right.
You know, the idea initially was, the lyric is self-evident, obviously, but
Yeah.
the idea was to start with the acoustic guitar, a little frantically when the soloing comes in, and then go to a really relaxed
Yeah.
kind of thing, and build the idea of what the event was.
Yeah.
And then ultimately, once the chorus happens, it's the anger of what has happened and the hope that people in Oklahoma will get through it as they do.
Yeah.
And then building to a frenzy with the orchestra to the end, and then it just stops, because the idea being, well, what happens next? Does this ever happen again?
Yeah. I think right there, that lyric, you know, even where you've got in the kind of chorus part, we lose the innocence, right? We build warmth from our wounds.
Yeah, yeah.
That's a great line.
That was the day I saw it, on the 19th of April in '95. Those two lines I wrote.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And that's the thing I took away for years until now.
Wow. So that you'd been sitting with that song since back then?
Yeah,
at
and
some level.
and as we talked about, I didn't want to release it or even do it that early, so that in '95 you're doing it, it's crash, it's capitalizing on some horrible tragedy. So waiting until now, I thought, was, you know, the decent thing to do.
Yeah.
And you know, really making it, you know, tribute to the people who suffered through that, which I think everyone in this country did.
Yeah. I want to play one song before we talk about it, because you and I talked about it earlier, because I couldn't wait till the interview to ask you about. So Paul, track 21, the tune Goodbye, if we can listen to the beginning of that. Man, the first time I heard that, I was like, what's this chicken picking on here? And it's good, man. It's some great playing.
I love doing that stuff. It's,
Yeah.
The main thing about that is you have to have a Telecaster,
Yeah.
and you have to have a B bender.
B bender,
I don't know
right.
if you know what a B bender is, but on the B string, there's a mechanism where, rather than bending with your fingers, you can bend with your fingers, but you also have the ability to, you pull the neck down, and it comes up wherever you want to tune it to, and in the case of most cases, it's a full tone.
Yeah.
So you pull it up, and it goes up a tone, and you let it back, and it just provides that country, the slick country
Yeah.
thing. In
Yeah.
fact, Led Zeppelin, Jimmy Page used it on one song, I remember. So it's been around for thousands of years, but
Yeah.
but what is that song? Da 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 dum, da 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 dum.
Oh, I'm not sure. Oh, Dancing Days. Yeah, right.
That's a B bender on that.
Yeah.
So it's just a wonderful mechanism, but I mean, some of these country pickers are just extraordinary.
Yeah.
And I just love doing that. It's such a different way of playing guitar and such a different discipline
Yeah.
in a lot of ways.
I like that songwriting of yours there too, where you start with something that feels very much like a country tune, but the
Right.
chorus is a full-on rock and roll chorus.
Yeah, okay, get out the way. Here we go.
right. And then I wanted to play one more from the new album, also that we talked about. The very next track, which is Tumbleweed.
Walking, walking into the twilight, roaming through the dark clouds, watching shadows move faintly. Wait as you move close to me, so gently, looking for a warmth, still as night, silence in your eyes, tender, tender. If I give
Just the opening part of that, because I have to tell you what we've talked about vocal harmony work
Right.
today. That's all you.
Yeah, that's all me, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. You know, the way I did that actually is if you just sit and have a microphone and just do, you know, multiple takes building in these huge chords,
Yeah.
it's not going to sound too huge. So I actually put on the floor in the studio, placing, if you like.
Really?
Yeah, so this note, the first note would be there, microphone's still here. And
Oh, I see your mic here.
it's not
There
my,
we go.
It's not my cough, I promise. And then the next microphone goes there, so there were, I think, 6 positions.
So you were actually sort of thinking spatially of the chords as you were recording them.
Right. So,
Wow.
and that's why it sounds
That lush kind of.
lushy kind of thing, yeah. And then the chords are pretty extended and
That's where, when you and I were talking about it earlier, there's a little bit of that phasing sort of sound in there. It's obviously because of the spatial difference in the mics.
right.
Wow. That's a beautiful sound on that.
Yeah, no, I was really happy with that.
Yeah.
Took a long time.
Yeah.
I hope it was worth it.
Yeah, it does have a Beach Boys quality, right? Absolutely. Which, you know, it's funny in thinking about Yes all the way back, you know, John often talked about with Chris that even Yes was really on some level a vocal harmony group
Oh,
from the
very much
beginning.
so, yeah.
And Bill Bruford once told me, I was talking to Bill about his kind of jazz drumming on it.
Yeah.
And he said, I was under no, illusions. I knew I was a jazz drummer joining a vocal harmony group.
Right,
That's the way
right.
he saw his work with Yes at the time, right?
And very true. I mean, you listen to the beginning of Seen All Good People, it's like,
Yeah.
what is that? Who is that? I mean, immediately.
Right.
You know.
Yeah, and their love for Simon and Garfunkel and
Oh,
all
yeah.
that stuff too, right? Yeah. All right, well, I'll tell you what, since it's getting a little bit later and we want to make sure everybody gets a chance to get online and purchase the CDs with Trevor, I think we'll wrap it here, get Trevor out to the front of the theater so you can purchase and sit and say hi to Trevor and get it signed. So ladies and gentlemen, help me out and say thank you so much to Trevor
you.
Rabin.
Thank you so much. Thank you.